At 0350 hours local time, a steel shelter door at Saki Air Base tore off its rails, and a wall of fire punched out into the pre-dawn dark. A Ukrainian one-way attack drone had just driven straight through it, after flying more than 150 miles to reach that single point of steel. Inside that shelter and the ones beside it sat as many as 7 Russian combat aircraft, Su-30SM fighters and Su-24 bombers, worth together as much as $350 million. Within seconds, the fire had jumped to the next shelter, and a column of black smoke was climbing off the base you could see from miles down the coast. This was Saki, not a random airfield, but the home of Russia's 43rd Separate Naval Assault Aviation Regiment, sitting on the western shoulder of Crimea, near the town of Novofedorivka. From here, Su-30SM fighters and Su-24 bombers had flown mission after mission against southern Ukraine, and here Russia kept some of the most expensive hardware it had left on the peninsula, jets that run $30 to $50 million apiece. Saki was not an easy target either. It sat behind the layered air defense umbrella that Moscow had spent years building over Crimea, the shield that was supposed to make the peninsula untouchable. And yet this strike was not even the first of the week. It was part of a wider Ukrainian pressure campaign aimed at one goal: making Crimea impossible for Russia to operate from. But here is the part that should not have worked. By the summer of 2026, Russia knew its jets on Crimea were being hunted, so it did the obvious thing. It rolled them off the open aprons, where a drone could find them in seconds, and it tucked them inside hardened aircraft shelters, thick concrete boxes built to shrug off blast and shrapnel. On paper, that was the safe move. A shelter turns a soft, burning target into a protected one. The crews at Saki went to sleep that night believing their most valuable aircraft were finally out of reach, sealed behind concrete and steel. That belief was the weakness, because a hardened shelter is built to stop fragments spraying sideways from a near miss, not a drone flying straight down the throat of the door. Ukraine did not aim at the concrete. It aimed at the seams, the doors, the openings, the roofs. It turned Russia's own protection into a trap that sealed the aircraft inside with the fire. To understand why 7 of those jets never got the chance to leave, you have to go back 2 days, to the mistake that put them in those shelters in the first place. But first, consider what that drone had to survive just to arrive over the base. To reach Saki, a Ukrainian drone had to cross one of the most heavily defended stretches of sky in the war. Crimea does not rely on a single weapon. It relies on layers. Somewhere behind the coast sits the long reach of Russia's premier surface-to-air system, the outer ring meant to swat down anything approaching from a distance. Closer in are the shorter-range point defense systems that guard the bases themselves. On a map at a command post, it looks airtight. Ring inside, ring, nothing getting through. But that umbrella was built to face a certain kind of threat. Fast jets and missiles coming in high and hot, the way air forces have attacked for 70 years. A long-range air defense radar is magnificent when it is looking up. Point it at the high sky and it can see a fighter hundreds of miles out. Point it at the horizon, at something crawling low over the land and sea, and it starts to struggle. The curve of the earth hides the target. Coastlines, buildings, and waves throw back a mess of false returns. The powerful eye designed to find a jet at 40,000 feet has a hard time picking a small, slow, low object out of the ground clutter beneath it. That is the gap Ukraine flies through. A one-way attack drone does not try to outrun or outclimb the defenses. It does the opposite. It stays low, it stays slow, and it heads for a target that cannot move. Think of a security guard standing in a courtyard, scanning the rooftops for a sniper. He is looking up, sweeping the skyline, exactly where the danger is supposed to come from. He never looks down, and the real threat is a man crawling across the courtyard floor toward the one door the guard forgot to lock. The air defense umbrella over Crimea spent the night watching the high sky. The drones came in under it, and this is where the numbers stop mattering the way Moscow wants them to. A defensive system can be rated for enormous range and still be useless if it never gets a clean look at what is coming. The reach printed in the brochure assumes the radar sees you early, fly low enough against a fixed target close to the coast, and you shrink that reach down to almost nothing, not by defeating the system, but by never letting it start its work in time. So the outer shield, for all its reputation, was solving the wrong problem. It was hunting for something fast and high. What was coming was slow and low, and it was headed for the one thing on that base Russia thought it had already made safe. Here is the twist. 2 days earlier, Ukraine had already hit Saki. That first strike went after aircraft hangars, and Russian crews learned the lesson every commander learns after a bad night. Get the jets out of the open. Move them under cover. Harden the target. So they did. In the days around those strikes, Russia pushed its remaining aircraft into hardened aircraft shelters, the reinforced concrete structures scattered across the base for exactly this reason. It was the textbook response. A jet parked on an open apron is a soft target. A drone finds it, dives on it, and burns it in one pass. A jet inside a concrete shelter is supposed to be protected. The whole point of the structure is to absorb a blast and keep the fragments outside. And that decision is what turned everything into a disaster. Because a hardened shelter is designed against the wrong threat too. It is built to survive a near miss, a bomb or a shell going off nearby, throwing shrapnel sideways. The thick walls stop that. But the shelter is not a sealed vault. It has a mouth, a large sliding door, seams, roof panels, ventilation. Those openings are the price of getting an aircraft in and out. And a one-way attack drone does not detonate outside and spray fragments at the walls. It flies straight at the opening and delivers its warhead through it, into the exact space the walls were built to protect. Picture a knight in heavy armor who kneels behind a shield and closes his visor, certain no arrow can touch him. That armor will stop a slash or a glancing blow all day, but it has a slit at the eyes because he has to see. Aim a single arrow through that slit, and every plate of steel around it becomes worthless. Worse than worthless, because now he is trapped inside a shell with the thing that is killing him. The shelter did the same thing to those aircraft. Once fire got in through the door, the same walls that were supposed to keep danger out now held the heat and the burning fuel in, right on top of the jet. That is why the satellite images tell the story they do. In the imagery released afterward, you can see the aftermath at shelter after shelter, heavy protective doors torn clean off, blown outward off their rails. The concrete boxes are largely still standing, the structures held. But that is exactly the point. The shelters survived. The aircraft inside them did not. Which raises the question the Russian crews were about to answer the hard way. If the shield had already failed the moment those doors were chosen as the aim point, how many of those jets could still get out? And how fast could a drone close the final distance before anyone understood what was happening? The last stretch happens fast. A drone in its terminal dive is no longer searching. It has already found the shelter, and it is committed. The nose comes down. The door fills the frame. There is no maneuver left to make, and no time left to make it. In the final seconds of that dive, the drone covers the last stretch of ground faster than anyone on the base could react to it. By the time a guard hears the engine note change, the aircraft inside is already gone. Even if a crewman looked up, saw the shape, and understood exactly what it meant, there was nothing left to do but watch it finish the line it had already drawn through the air. The first drone goes through the door. The blast has nowhere to spread. It slams against the inside of the concrete, and the overpressure does what the walls guarantee it will do. It drives outward through the only opening, and the heavy steel door blows off its rails and tumbles into the open. Behind it, inside, the fireball washes over the aircraft. Fuel in the jet's own tanks catches. Now the shelter is not protecting anything. It is an oven, and the aircraft is inside it. Whatever the jet was, a $30 million fighter, a bomber fresh off a sortie, it stops being a weapon and becomes a fire that no one can reach in time to put out. Then the next one, and the next. Shelter after shelter along the line takes the same blow at the same weak point. This is the part that turns a single hit into a catastrophe. The shelters are close together, built in a row, and once one is burning, the fire does not stay politely inside its own concrete box. Heat radiates. Fragments from a warhead and from the aircraft's own ruptured airframe spray across the gaps. A jet in the shelter next door does not need its own drone. It can be wrecked by the one that hit its neighbor, close enough that one strike feeds the next. 7 hangars, one after another. The smoke from each rises and merges into a single black column over the base, the kind of column that tells everyone for miles that the safe rear is not safe anymore. And Saki was only half of the night. To the east, at the Gvardeyskoye airfield, more drones came down on a different kind of target. The shelters where Russia stored its own attack drones, the Shahed and Gerbera types it launches at Ukrainian cities. 2 structures there took hits as well. In one night, Ukraine struck both the manned jets that pressure its south and the unmanned weapons that terrorize its rear. 2 airfields, one message. By the time the fire settled, the shape of it was clear. Russia had done everything the manual said. It saw the threat coming after the earlier strike. It moved its aircraft under cover. It relied on the layered defenses that were supposed to make Crimea a fortress. And none of it mattered, because every one of those measures was built to stop a different war than the one being fought over its head. So consider what was actually lost. According to Ukraine's security service, the strikes hit 7 hangars at Saki, and at least 7 Russian aircraft were destroyed or damaged, a mix of Su-30SM and Su-30 fighters and Su-24 frontline bombers. Put a price on that, and the number climbs fast. A single Su-30SM runs somewhere between $30 and $50 million. 7 airframes in that class means losses that plausibly reach into the hundreds of millions, potentially around $350 million in one night. And these are not aircraft Russia can quickly replace. Combat jets come off production lines slowly, and every one burned at Saki is one that will never fly another mission against southern Ukraine. Add the 2 shelters hit at Gvardeyskoye, where Russia stored the Shahed and Gerbera drones it fires at Ukrainian cities, and a single operation reached both the manned aircraft attacking the front and the unmanned ones attacking the rear. But the deeper damage is not measured in dollars. It is measured in what Russia now has to believe about Crimea. For years, the peninsula was the safe rear, the place jets returned to, refueled, rearmed, and slept. This strike, coming just 2 days after the last one, says that era is over. When you hit the same base twice in 1 week, you are not scoring a lucky shot. You are setting a tempo. You are telling the enemy that moving aircraft under cover does not help, that hardening the shelters does not help, that there is no longer a corner of Crimea where an expensive airplane can be considered out of reach. And that forces a choice that has no good answer. Russia can keep its aircraft on Crimea and keep losing them in 1s and 2s and 7s, or it can pull them back to airfields deeper inside Russia, which means longer flights to the front, less time over the battlefield, and less pressure on Ukraine's south. Either way, Ukraine wins the exchange. It is spending relatively cheap drones to make Russia's most expensive machines a liability wherever they park. All of this lands while Crimea is already straining. Fuel shortages, gasoline rationing at the height of summer, a rear that is supposed to feel secure and instead feels under siege. That is the real lesson of Saki. The defenses were not beaten by something bigger or faster. They were beaten by an attacker that refused to fight the war they had prepared for. The umbrella watched the high sky. The drones came in low. The shelters were built against blast from outside. The drones went in through the door. Every safeguard Russia trusted was answered not with more force, but with a better question. Where isn't it looking? If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, with Crimea's air bases no longer safe, do you think Russia pulls its aircraft back to the mainland, or keeps gambling that the next strike misses? Let's keep it about the analysis, and let's keep hoping for a just peace.